Namaste. So, countless are the gifts that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have given to the world. Most of us have still not opened the pages, magic pages in which these gifts are there. And that's what I say, that forget about if you want to come to ashram, don't want to come to ashram, you want to practice the yoga, you don't want to practice the yoga. That's an individual thing, and it's a question of readiness and many other aspects. But at least read Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. There is so much wealth even for our everyday life. From birth, conception, or even before. Marriage, partnership, conception, birth, to school, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, different stages of life, different hopes and aspirations, sleep, dream, money, success, yoga, spirituality, moksha, and beyond. I don't know, there are many things which I must have missed. Relationships, the most difficult and dangerous and complex subject. The least discussed. People tend to think it's nothing. But this is the most difficult part, okay? Because human beings are the most complex creations. And the nuttiest and the most, not only complex, where they're diverse. It's not like a machine where you learn complexity of one machine and you can understand all computers work the same way. Each one works differently. And in human life, this is the thing which we most encounter. So, on every sphere, every aspect, and everything which he has touched, he has not just given a set of techniques, he has given us the principles, and he has given us such an insight that we can ourselves keep developing upon it once the doors are opened. That's something very beautiful. So he didn't give us a technique, do this, don't do this. This is not Sri Aurobindo's way. He would suggest rather than impose. He would give us hints and lead us to the doors and give us the joy of discovery. So this is the way of Sri Aurobindo, and in this process, among many, many, many countless gifts, which are a week-long subject, one of them is the 3 principles of education. As I said, just a very small little thing, but with very deep and far-reaching imports. He starts this essay by saying very clearly that though European education has certain advantages, there are many defects which are inherent in it. And one of the defects he points out, it is not based on an adequate understanding of human psychology. So any education which doesn't understand what human beings are, so how can it be really valid? At the same time, it becomes worse when it is imposed from the Western world to the Indian world. It makes it even worse. And unfortunately, sometimes we have picked up the worst of the Western education. There are beautiful things, but we have picked up the worst and put it here. For example, in some of these Western universities and colleges, you don't have this kind of an exam system the way we have it. So there are projects, there is a way you understand. Stress is on understanding, but here it has turned into a memory, memory device, and vomiting out what you have read. And based on that, you get marks, and based on the marks, you are sent further, which is, of course, the worst kind of. We have picked up the worst from the West in the name of, taking of culture. There are very good things in the West. For instance, there is this stress on one kind of individuality, whatever it be, but it has its place. But there also, we have picked up the worst of things and imposed it here, like coloring of the hairs with a different color. It's okay, no problem with that. Sometimes equally we have seen the worst of India is picked up by the West. For instance, the moment you talk about sadhus and sannyasis, they think they are chilam smoking people. I know of a person who came all the way from Europe to visit India, and he came to India because he had heard about sadhus. His mother was so distressed when she was recounting this story that I told him such wonderful things about India, because she had visited here and she went, and of course you don't impose, you go to Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Now there are authentic places, but he said okay, he was very enthused, India tour. So he came, and Indian spirituality, so he went straight to Haridwar, because this is I don't know why we have this notion that Anyways, I don't want to get into controversial subjects. So he went there, and from there he went on a trek to Himalaya looking for sadhus. So what happened was, he was expecting sadhus all wherever he saw somebody in saffron, very nice boy. He was taken up. Oh, here is a sadhu. He had not read the Ramayana, that you don't become a sadhu by wearing a dress or by saying Ram Ram. So he went there, and these sadhus ultimately he smoked chilam, ganja, and then everything was stolen, including the passport. So the boy came back with a very bruised state. So, I spoke to the boy. I said, well, you did learn a lesson the hard way. The first lesson that Mother India teaches is to be detached from everything. So the only thing that the sadhus did, they were nothing but robbers. But they robbed you of all your old identity, including your passport. So if you can take on from here now, then of course you will have a wonderful future opening up. But it was a very traumatic thing. One need not. So many times we see that the worst from both countries, whereas it should be both sides of the globe, the best should be taken in. And there is best in everywhere in the world. So now we come back to these three principles of education with this background, that we should not impose. Sri Aurobindo gives a certain universal principle. These are valid not only for education, they are valid in every walk of life. And I have found them very useful in counseling, extremely useful in relationships. So one of them is, the first principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. This idea that I can teach somebody, I can convert somebody, I can convince somebody, I can try to force my views on somebody, is one of the biggest waste of time. I use the worst way of time pass. People often ask, then what are you doing? I say, I am doing none of these things. I am sharing the joy of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. You take it or leave it, I have no issues. I am not here to convince anyone. That's the joy of the teaching. Take it or leave it. Raise questions. You can discuss. But this is the whole thing, that nothing can be taught. So what do we do in schools? That's why the mother often spoke about the last school. Why? Because what is meant to be done in the school? You see, the ancient Gurukul, it was not like this subject, that subject. You start organically. And what is that process? The teacher is not an instructor or taskmaster. So you don't create artificial robots. You create living beings. When we push knowledge from outside, thrust it from outside, we create artificial people who can, it is one of the saddest sight one can ever encounter in the present day Indian system is when you have a 5-year-old child and suddenly the parents, they want to impress you and say, oh, wala wo poem sunana, what is that, twinkle, twinkle, little star, and I have to tell them, please stop, it's okay, fine, you can't. And the child starts off thinking that this is so wonderful and there is a twinkle in the parents' eyes. This is not what we want children to become. But this is how it is understood. So this idea should go. The teacher is not an instructor or taskmaster. Taskmaster means finish this homework, do this within so much time. Or instructor, thus thou shalt do, thus thou shalt not do. It goes on endlessly. He is a helper and a guide. He should be like a friend. That's what I love about Sri Krishna and Sri Aurobindo. Unlike all the other masters we put on a pedestal, put all the malas, Sri Aurobindo and of course the mother. You talk to them, it looks like they are here to help you. They are not here to condemn you, judge you, or tell you a set of instructions. They are like friends. Something so beautiful. You can tell anything. Who is a friend? You can share anything with them. People have come and shared things with, Mother and Sri Aurobindo, because all life is in the ambit of education. In every sphere there is education. It's not about subject but about life. So the teacher is helper and guide. So let the person learn, student learn. Wherever there is a difficulty, the person encounters, you help. And then you guide. See, guide is very interesting. It points away. So this is the task of the teacher. His business is to suggest and not to impose. You can say, well, I think if you do this way, it is better. But sometimes human beings have to go through their own painful experiences and learn. He does not actually train the pupil's mind. He only shows him how to perfect his instruments of knowledge and helps and encourages him in the process. For example, we are straight away taught how to, read and write, but we don't have the faculty of concentration. So teach concentration, maybe through a game like Mikado, through carom board. When you have difficulty of concentration, you can turn in any direction. So this is where he has to learn how to perfect the instruments of knowledge. And he gives in great detail. There are 10 or 12 aspects only of the human mind. We don't even know. We just know about memory. There are 12 senses which we don't even know. There are so many emotions. There are 10 rasas. We don't even know. We only know love, hate, fear, some vague kind of. Even there are so many shades. Once I was speaking to someone and I said, tell me all the shades of love. People don't even know. They know only one love, which is by sending those heart smileys. What really is love? How does it express itself? So many shades. People don't know this. They don't know that care is a form of love, a very important form. Simply a feeling of tenderness, a soft feeling in the heart. All these are expressions of love, which one may have and yet not have those smileys popping up. So, this he teaches us to explore and discover ourselves and to perfect these processes. Instead of saying, don't do this, do it well, do it beautifully, whatever the person is engaged in doing. There are so many beautiful examples of it, that if you see a child doing something which you think is, let's say, children often engage in fight. Mother was told about it. They are becoming violent and all this. She said, no, why? I have learnt fencing when I was young. Teach them how to wield the stick or the sword in a nice way, beautiful way, as an artist, as a samurai, rather than saying, hey, don't pick up the stick, don't do this, this is... now, when we do this kind of don't do, then over a period of time, children shrink into a shell. They're afraid even of experimenting. So teach them how to handle things instead of saying don't touch. Teach them how to touch it, how to feel it, what it means to touch, let's say, this object, how to handle it carefully. Nobody teaches them. We just told them don't touch. Why? Because he will drop it. So he reminds us that he helps and encourages him in the process. He does not impart knowledge to him. He shows him how to acquire knowledge for himself. So he does not tell him that, history is according to this book. He says how to explore history. For instance, to give just one example out of many, we are taught history in the way that you have those documentary evidences. But a lot of history in India was transmitted without documentary evidence. Is it untrue for that matter? What my father did when I was a child, I am the one who is privy to it, and my mom, is it untrue? Simply because it's transmitted through our oral memory. In India, this tradition was kept alive. Similarly, to see forces that act behind history, is it untrue? So that's why in India we have history, itihas. What are the books? Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are regarded as mythologies. Why? Because our whole idea of history is so-called outer objective facts, whose own validity is doubtful. Because supposing you draw newspaper cuttings from 100 years back or whatever, people make sure Bindu's life like that. Now when you draw these cuttings, you are presuming that the journalist who was writing was honest and faithful and true to what he was doing. That premise itself is incorrect. We are not even taught that, and we take it as documentary evidence. Whereas somebody looks at Sri Aurobindo and he mentioned that, oh, I saw in him the avatar of the future. You don't want to put it because it's not documented in the typical newspaper cutting. So this is one example. Same with everything. There is a true geography we are not taught. As I was saying that, where you see how a land has evolved, how a country has been formed. It's something very amazing. How there are changing patterns of the season, how the soil develops. So everything that we teach is disconnected from life. So we have to teach them how to discover. And discovery can be through anything. Pick up any section of piece of mud and you can discover the whole world, universe is crammed into a grain of sand. So this is how he takes to the discovery. So this is the first principle he teaches, and I can just give you one example is that someone once asked a group of children that, well, what did you have today? People have come to hear a great speaker from ashram, so they are all, what he will tell about spiritual things, some yoga, do this way, sit this way. So he said, what did you have for food today? Now children are all delighted. So one of them said, idli. So idli, where did it, what is it made up of? Rice. Where does rice come from? So now, everybody is busy. From this, that, there is all this going on. Ultimately, it led to a point where one discovered that in every grain of rice, the farmer's sweat and blood, Mother Nature's gifts, the five elements, sun, everything, and divine, everything is involved in a grain of rice. And then one of the child remarked, oh, that means in one grain of rice, everything is there. So the teacher says, now you understand Shri Krishna's story? Where he picks that little grain of rice and says, I am tript. See, it is an insight which has to come. It is not like rice is composed of calorie facts. This is not the way. Imagine eating rice with this idea that I am taking Brahman inside. It is so different from taking calorie facts. Plenty of examples I could give you in my own interaction with children, where you can lead them to the doors of knowledge and they come up with wonders. So one of the child adolescent, he was speaking about, I have a project, I have to write something on love. So I said, okay, before I tell you something, you tell me what do you feel about love. So this 15-year-old keeps thinking after that, says, actually, there is nothing else but love. I said, class over. I said, no need to know anything more. Okay, can you elaborate? Then yes, what is love? Now you see, instead of telling them something from outside and showing our own ignorance, we glorify our ignorance. Let's bring out knowledge from them. So this is the first principle. The second principle is that the mind has to be consulted in its own growth. This we have completely ignored. Our entire education has become disconnected with life, with the soil in which we have grown up. So, what happens as a result? The idea of hammering the child into the shape desired by the parent or teacher is a barbarous and ignorant superstition. We want him, before the child is even grown up, to decide. We have decided his fate and his destiny. So this is a barbarous and ignorant superstition. It is he himself who must be induced to expand in accordance with his own nature. So not everybody, that wonderful example of Taradi. So she would not take so much interest in typical classroom studies. But very few people are aware that almost 75%, lots of questions of question answers were asked by her. And her father would often tell her, are you the only ignorant girl? तो क्या इकल्ली मूर्ख जैसी सब क्वेश्चन करती रहती है? But thanks to her, that we have such a wonderful set of answers. And there was a time when people didn't ask questions. The mother stopped the class. She said people are not interested in knowing. It must come from inside the student, what they want to know. That is the unique aspect of the mother's conversations. She never spoke on a beforehand topic. Someday she would say that tomorrow is 15th August. Today we are going to just meditate on the remembrance of Sri Aurobindo. But most of the time these talks are triggered by a question. If you read through that conversation, you will see that they have gone all over the world. Sometimes you even wonder, what was the question? And then she says, I respond to the state of consciousness. And she would cram the whole world. Just read it, so amazing. How she would bring all these different dimensions in a question, which is seemingly, a matter of fact question. So she would go from consulting the mind in its own growth, meaning thereby what is inspiring the question. The answer will not be the same. Somebody who is, for instance, asking, okay, tell us about, some people ask, okay, tell us about spiritual life. I had this meeting in the lift. I used to go in the morning for, cleaning of the Bhavan, Sri Aurobindo Bhavan in Alsur Lake. So suddenly somebody saw me in the lift, one of the officers. So he used to see 5:30 going in the morning. So he suddenly asked me, every day you go in the morning, what place you go? So I said, Sri Aurobindo Bhavan. He said, oh, yoga karne, you go for yoga. Now I know what he's meaning and what he's asking. I just said yes. So he said, it is very good for the body. I said, yes. What did you say? You're not going to give me a lecture on what yoga is? So, this is, each one asks the same question but with a very different consciousness. The answer will not be a standard format. Wherever you see people giving a standard format answer means they don't know this principle of education. To one person who asks about Savitri, you can say that it's a epic poem. To another person who asks about Savitri, you can say that it's a wonderful poetry with such wonderful rhythm and all. To third person, you can say it's the story of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. To fourth person, it is actually the story of the Divine Mother and the entire universe is there in it. You, me, all are characters here in it. To somebody else, you may say, just read it and take the joy of it. So there is no standard one answer because the mind has to be consulted in its own growth. It means that don't ignore the person, the material which has come to you. This is only possible if either there is a one-to-one education, which is what the mother wanted through free progress system, or when there is a small group. If you have 30 students, it's just impossible. So it needs a radical rethinking of our education system. At least it should be like, even if you want to do it like that, ideal is to have more schools and less student-teacher ratio. But if you still want to do it this way, there should be a possibility of a separate engagement of individual students who want to know more and want to know differently. This what is beginning in some of the schools who are creating this kind of a parallel education. This is the way in India you can do it by bringing in this element. So mind has to be consulted. The idea of hammering the child into the shape desired by the parent or teacher is a barbarous and ignorant superstition. So coming back to Taradi's story, so mother called her, why you are not interested in studies? She said, no mother, what do you want to do? I love photography. She said, okay, get her a camera and let her do photography. No, you don't have to go to the school and study. And see, she developed like that. And look what a wonderful work she has done. So this is how the mother and Sri Aurobindo would encourage each one taking into account their own swadharma. So here he says, it is himself who must be induced to expand in accordance with his own nature. This is what free progress is. Education governed by the soul, by your soul. So what it means in the Indian context is swabhava and swadharma. So see what your true nature is and the education should be according to that. And then he cautions there can be no greater error than for the parent to arrange beforehand that his son shall develop particular qualities, capacities, ideas, virtues, or be prepared for a pre-arranged careers. He says there can be no greater error. Why? Because you are totally making an artificial machine. To force the nature to abandon its own dharma is to do it permanent harm, mutilate its growth and deface its perfection. It is a selfish tyranny over a human soul and a wound to the nation which loses the benefit of the best that a man could have given. Imagine Arjuna in today's times. What he will go into a standard school? Probably because he was a boy with good concentration. He would top the university, and then if he told his father, I want to be in the military, no, you have better career options. Imagine, there would be many potential Arjunas, we don't know, who can become truly instruments of a God's design. At one place, Sri Aurobindo says, it is better to be a good and competent, perfect shoemaker than to be an incompetent king. You have the joy of what you are doing. That story of Abraham Lincoln when somebody pointed out to him when his father was a shoemaker. When he comes elected into the parliament, they don't like it, He comes from the depressed classes. So somebody made a remark. This was the civilized nation some time back. So the remark was that, don't forget, Mr. Lincoln, Mr. President, don't forget that, your fathers used to mend shoes. It was a way of, it was a double comment that, don't forget your humble beginnings, but also it carried an undertone. Don't forget who you are. And he remarked with great wisdom and, tremendous capacity, brilliance. He said, yes, not only I don't forget it, I have learned the trait from him, and if ever you have a problem, I can mend your shoe in a way that never again it'll give trouble. That was the state. That was the president of America at one point of time. Because the land was meant to become something. If you see George Washington's dreams, you see very clearly that there was a future of the land. Still is, let us put it like that. It must recapture its own soul, true soul. So this is how education must be imparted. Whatever you are good at, whatever your natural temperament is, and that we know that's how in India you had the fourfold order of society. The seekers after knowledge, those who are born leaders, administrators, those who have a lot of violent tendencies. India didn't say don't be violent. It says channelize your violence into the Kshatriya. You see what happened with the emasculation of the race. That's the only word you can use. Thanks to our whatever, Mr. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, that we cannot, even when dastardly things are going on in front of you, you don't even have the courage to raise a voice. What happened to the Kashmiri Pandits? Still we talk about bonhomie. There was recently a news item, I don't know it is about recent or some other time, that when people came from Hajj, the Kashmiri Pandits were receiving them with great joy. Be careful, don't lose the lesson of history. Of course we should be non-violent, but it should be non-violence of the strong. Arjuna never raises his... That's why the difference between Arjuna and what was that other fellow, Eklavya, whom we try to idolize. Same with Karna, because we have this mentality. Oh, poor fellow. So we try to idolize Eklavya. Eklavya had no control over himself. He fills a dog's mouth with arrows. Arjuna would never do such a thing. Such calm self-control. He doesn't want to fight. But if challenged to fight, then he would fight unto death. This is the ancient Indian ideal. So violence was channelized into divine heights rather than saying don't because it is bad. So these are things which we have to discover. The Vaishya, the natural, the birth boy gifted. You see, the Vaishya type will never have quarrel with anybody. You can find it. He'll always be good, nice, pleasant. This instinct for harmony is there. But at the end, he is very careful about money, about everything. Shubhita spoke about it. When he was told that a particular group in India, they are very attached to money, he said, no, they bring money because they are very organized with regard to money. They keep account of every penny. That's how they draw the money forth. There are people like that. And there are, of course, who are born with talent with the hand. So each nature must be consulted in its own growth. Every man has in him something divine, something his own, a chance of strength and perfection in however small a sphere which God offers him to take or refuse. So we must understand that nobody is there without his own strength. But obviously a tortoise is not meant to run a race on the ground with a hare. It's a very wrong story. Tortoise has its own merits. It's not meant to run a race actually. Poor fellow, you are making him run a race and then you give a false idea that slow and steady wins the race. Silliest story, I ever read. Until date they teach it. A tortoise has his capacity in water and land. Call a rabbit to do it. And tortoise has its capacity, it's slow. See, the story can have a different meaning. Slow and steady wins the race. Tortoise is slow. He breathes very slow. Tortoise breathes 3 times or 5 times in a minute. And tortoise lives for 300 to 500 years. The rabbit runs, pants, heavy breathing, breathes heavily, and dies within 12 years or less than that. So in that sense, yes, but not on the physical ground. So something we can learn from the tortoise. How to conserve our energy. Tortoise, you see, little bit aside, but it's very interesting. Why? Because mother chose the symbol of immortality for the tortoise. The tortoise is a symbol of immortality. See, what are the specialty of the tortoise? Can withdraw itself into the shell. tremendous concentration. What the Gita actually gives this simile, pratyahar, the ability to withdraw into yourself, and nothing can harm you or touch you. Great capacity. It's not competing with anybody. If you see a tortoise, you'll feel he's Atmarati. He's not bothered. You try to do something, he'll look at you. Amazing eyes. Huh? Try to get. Have you interacted? Something very interesting. I have interacted. He will look with a very wise, philosophical, sage-like vision at you that what are you doing? You start feeling foolish that you are playing with him as if it's a cat or a dog. He's not a cat or a dog. He's not interested. He looks at you, then he goes about his own work. He'll suddenly vanish also. How they manage their life, I don't know. And then, of course, he will be in water in his own world or on land in his own world, breathes very little, and look how he lives. So it is a symbol of immortality. But don't try to turn a tortoise into a rabbit. That's the point. Rabbits have their own place. Let them be where they are. And they are also nice. They shouldn't feel bad. So everyone has in one something special. The task is to find it and develop it. The chief aim of education should be to help the growing soul to draw out that in itself which is best and make it perfect for a noble use. This is something very important. Educe means to bring out. So to bring out and put it for a noble use. No point in bringing out capacities, but they are not at good use. This is what creates an Asuric civilization. A developed intellectual mind with a puny heart but strong passions. This is the hallmark of the Asura. Extremely developed mind. You can calculate very fast everything, but you're doing it at the danger of suppressing the energies of the heart. But the passions are there. Now imagine what it can create. So, Sri Aurobindo cautions us that a nation which doesn't do it, it loses its own strength and its own powers. And the last and third principle, the third principle of education is to work from the near to the far, from that which is to that which shall be. And that's why many times the mother and Sri Aurobindo's answers are very difficult to understand. And people quote it without, sometimes you feel like, now for instance, there was a place where somebody asked the mother. The question is that, somebody has asked her that whether I should continue worship Rama or Krishna or Hanuman, these stories, etc. So the disciple is saying, I answered this person, it is perfectly fine. This is not important whether you worship or you don't worship. And this should be your basically aspiration. This is not so important. But you can continue if you want to worship. And he asked at the end, Mother, am I right in saying so? Mother says, yes, quite so. At another place, he says something very interesting. He says, those who want to worship the gods may continue to do so, but they must know it has nothing to do with supramental yoga. Third place, he says that, indifference to all religions, but a benevolent goodwill towards all. With gods, the relation of friends. Because we are collaborators in this great divine work. So different times, she has said different things. At places when she speaks about Kali, she says that, people keep those crores of Kalis, they keep a image and then they say it will bring disaster to you. And they don't even realize that this is not the image of Kali, the Divine Mother, but hostile beings whom they have harbored in the form of an image. So, to each one, depending on his readiness, she would go from near to the far. People often ask that in the ashram context, so you have these 4 great pujas, which were celebrated here. You also have Christmas being celebrated here. So people ask, because they find it very difficult to understand. So we know the story. Actually, these great goddesses are truths of our inner existence. Sri Aurobindo has spoken about it. And the mother says that during these puja days, they used to come because Sri Aurobindo is present, they would come for the Leela. And plus, there is a collective atmosphere, everybody believes. And then there were some Bengalis who wanted to do the puja. So it started like that. You have those 4 days. But the same mother, people perhaps are aware or not, the last darshan she gave, I think, was 61 on Durga Puja. And later on she said, now it is no more the same thing. Because things change, they evolve. Later on when she was asked why, why there are festivals. So it was not a festival. The mother says, festivals are a concession to human nature. Men like festivals. This also she has said. So she didn't want it to be done in a festive spirit. They are aspects of the Divine Mother, and to that extent we can go. And since we are tuned to this, but somebody else may do it very differently. So same way Christmas started, because there were some Christians background. So they, on Christmas Day, they would distribute cakes to some of the, I think, 7-8 families. So when mother came to know about it, she said, Acha, okay, they are doing that. Okay, why not we do it in a more organized way? So it started in the playground and then now the ashram theatre. So the purpose was that because people could have connect through that means, so she opened every door, but she liberated all of them from their old conception. This we should not forget. So when she was speaking about the Divine Mother would come and give darshan on Durga Puja, Kali Puja, Saraswati Puja and Lakshmi Puja, what was she actually showing by a real example? They are aspects of the one Divine Mother. See the Divine Mother in all of them and all of them in the Divine Mother. As simple as that. She was not, talking about the conventional way in which we do things, which is more vital than the true atmosphere. Similarly with Christianity, what should she do? She actually liberated it by saying this is a convention which was before the birth of Christ. Nobody knows the birth of Christ, which is a fact. She said it was the day celebrated as the return of the light. So what did she do in one master stroke? She actually freed Christianity from certain trappings. And said, actually, we celebrate it as the birth of light. And then she connected with the new light and the new consciousness. It's a different thing that we don't understand it. So, the mind has to be taken from near to the far. Each context is different. And based on that, we have to take the person forward. Somebody one day, even now we draw other conclusions also. That the mother did not say that we should study Ramayana and Mahabharata. That is also not true. So we end up creating our own bubbles by our own predilections and our own preferences. It is vast and infinite. To each one, eternity in a grain of sand. From that one can approach and take the person to wherever we want to take. So the third principle of education is to work from the near to the far. And to what extent she could go is amazing. She could teach in a simple thing like chocolate, a whole lesson of life. She would do that to a child who was playing outside. Mother would work with the mother. His mother would work with the Divine Mother. And she asked, you have left the child outside his mother. No, bring him in. The child would play. So she gave him some things to play. Some pebbles, and so the child got engaged in the play. And then when the child was going, she gave some chocolates, putting them in the nice little bag. And the child is very happy and she says, remember, don't eat alone, share it with everybody. Second is, don't just throw the wrapper anywhere. You bring it, I will know which ones you liked and which one. So you're learning to choose. And keep this bag intact so that I can give you more. What a lesson of life. For a child, he said, in my life I have remembered this lesson the most. And it has helped him in life. So this is called near to the far. The basis of a man's nature. Now she's not saying you must be generous, but she has taught it. You must be careful, but she has taught it. You must, when you deal with matter, you must treat with respect, but she has taught it. Everything she has taught with. You must make your choices, but she has taught it. You must know which ones you want. So bring the wrapper and tell me. So a simple way of making choices. The basis of a man's nature is almost always, in addition to his soul's past, his heredity, his surroundings, his nationality, his country, the soil from which he draws sustenance, the air which he breathes, the sights, sounds, habits to which he is accustomed. They mold him not the less powerfully because insensibly. From that then we must begin. So we must not suddenly hang in. There are people who take that other approach. That no, it's all about new. So both sides we may swing. So we have to take from near to the far. They mold him. We must not take up the nature by the roots from the earth in which it must grow, or surround the mind with images and ideas of a life which is alien to that in which it must physically move. If anything has to be brought in from outside, it must be offered, not forced on the mind. Discuss freely, rationally, and give it as a choice. A free and natural growth is the condition of genuine development. So discuss with the child, consult with the child rationally, and show the pros and cons, and in the end, let the child choose. There are souls which naturally revolt from their surroundings and seem to belong to another age and clime. Let them be free to follow their bent. But the majority languish, become empty, become artificial, if artificially molded into an alien form. No, revolt is not allowed. Dissent is not allowed. So you are creating artificial molds. They should be led their own way. It is God's arrangement for mankind that they should belong to a particular nation, age, society, that they should be children of the past, possessors of the present, creations of the creators of the future. The past is our foundation, the present our material, the future our aim and summit. Each must have its due and natural place in a national system of education. So it basically amounts to saying, the mother summarized all this beautifully. She said, to be a true teacher, you must be a psychologist and a yogi. So true. One could equally say this of everything, including to prospective and present parents. To be a true parent, you must be a psychologist and a yogi. Not Durvasa yogi. But yogi who can understand, who is patient, father who is, who accepts things and yet stands by the child, mother who even in her indulgences is teaching the child how to grow. So all our original thing is in the divine, from where we draw the learning and then we apply it in real life. This is how the divine deals with us. So that's how we see in creation, different places, different people come, and then they grow through a process organically through the cycles of rebirth and lives in a very natural, organic way, not in an artificially imposed way, which is what the mind tends to do. Namaste.